Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all for coming to Birmingham's Food Pledge session. Now, I am delighted to see so many of you here today. My name is Paulette Hamilton, and I'm the Cabinet Member in Birmingham for Adult Social Care and Health, and I also cover public health. I am passionate about food and food poverty. It's something that we as a city have been looking at for a number of years. Now, before I go any further, we've got people who will be speaking and coming online via video and digital link. So what I want to do before we go any further is just go through the list of speakers today, and let's just start with Karina Lassaria Palma Reyes. She will be speaking to us via video, and then we've got the Mayor of Bergamo, but unfortunately she won't be able to be with us today. So we have got a brilliant replacement, David Davide, or yeah. And if David could just come to the stage and sit on the stage, I'd really appreciate that. That will save us time later on. Then we've got Michael Fakhri. Have I got that right? Oh, if I've sworn, forgive me. But Michael will be our keynote speaker, and he'll be speaking to us digitally. And then we've got Dr. Mush Anami. Yeah? Right. And the doctor will also be speaking to us digitally today. And last but by no means least, we've got Dr. Justin Varney from Birmingham, who's the Public Health Director. Justin, can I ask you to join us on stage, and then we can get started. Thank you. Now, unfortunately, you're going to have to listen to me for a few minutes while I just give an overview and a speech. Birmingham Municipality is it has an excellent working relationship with the MUF Global Partnership. We were delighted when we were voted back onto the steering group, which meant we could take an active part with what was happening in the MUF steering group. As a political leader who serves the people of Birmingham, the pandemic was a very, very difficult time for us. Our city has over 42% people from the BME community. Many people were in fear in the city. They did not truly understand what was happening. The most vulnerable had to continue working because they were classed as key workers. So when others were isolating in parts of the UK and in Birmingham, many of those that really should have been isolating were actually still going out to work, such as our nurses, taxi drivers, and some of our bus drivers, and a lot of others. Many people felt isolated at this time because one minute we were told in the UK you can go out, you can continue doing what you're doing. We had the Cheltenham races and everything. And then the next minute, by the 23rd of March, we were told you had to isolate, you couldn't leave the house. Many single parent mothers that were just hanging on by a string. Many other people that were 0-hour contract workers went from just about managing to not being able to manage. And as a city, people just felt isolated. We had over 18,000 people admitted to hospital from Birmingham. We had confirmed cases of COVID of 101,413, and confirmed deaths in Birmingham have been 2,976. And food banks just skyrocketed at this time. Birmingham City Council had to commission agencies to go through, to work through the voluntary sector to support what we were trying to do. And can I say, without the goodwill of our volunteers, citizens of that city, we could not have done what we were able to do. They not only donated food, but many of them came out and helped us deliver it, actually worked in our food banks for no extra cost. National government did provide food for the most vulnerable, but that took weeks to kick in. So it meant that Birmingham, the local council, had to provide the food until the national government could actually get its act together to ensure that the most vulnerable all had the food they needed. Birmingham had a problem. We had a problem with food poverty before the pandemic, but upcoming increases in things like our national insurance, which is going up in April by 1.25 percentage points, and also the loss of universal credit in the UK for the most vulnerable. Also the increase in reliance on these zero-hour contracts, which has been devastating for our country, and also people resisting to take the vaccine, which has meant that certain jobs they're not able to apply for anymore. Also, the massive increase that we've got coming down the line of gas and electricity has meant that we are in a perfect storm. COVID-19 has had a massive impact on our city. 84% of households before COVID-19 felt they had some food security. Since the advent of COVID-19 and post-COVID-19, in January 2021, the Food Foundation actually did a survey, and they found that 2.3% reported that they were hungry. They also told us that 11.8% of people surveyed were actually struggling. And they told us that 12.4% of people surveyed were worried about how they would find food. These are worrying statistics for a city like Birmingham, a first world city. This is very worrying. So you can imagine what other parts of the world, what they're going through at the moment. Can I say, in conclusion, it is really important that local governments continue to continue the discussions, but continue to be involved in this particular subject, because I absolutely believe that we must work with our central government and your municipalities, your central government, to ensure that our citizens get access to not just good quality food, but also food in bulk. So not just good quality food that's too expensive, but good quality food that's affordable. This will take time, but the pandemic showed that when our systems get together, with a can-do attitude, things do actually change quickly. So my last words to you are, we have to have that can-do attitude and stop saying what we cannot do if things are going to change. On that note, I'm going to shut up now, and we're going to move swiftly on to Carolina Lassaria Palma Reese. This lady has sent in a video. Could you play the video, please? With the sound. If we're struggling, we could move on to the next speaker. Yeah, do you want us to move on? Yeah? Okay. Could we then go straight over to Davier? Davier, could you, you are the Food Policy Officer, and you will now be speaking to us. Thank you very much, Davier.
Thank you very much. I'm supposed to make how is it supposed to work?
They're putting the slides up on
Yep.
the screen.
But anyway, meanwhile the slides are on the screen. I think I can sort the beauty of the live events. So this is nice. Then thank you all, and thank you Paulette for having me today here. I'm Davide Zarri, and I'm representing the Municipality of Bergamo, Italy. Today I'm here on behalf of my deputy mayor for social services that had some sudden institutional obligations. So I'll try to worthily represent my city today. Yeah, thank you. Today I'm going to talk about the role that cities played in ensuring, in answering to the crisis, to the COVID crisis, and the following social emergency that came up, and how cities answered to the crisis and ensuring access to adequate, healthy food to the most vulnerable groups and all citizens across Bergamo. Actually, some figures about the pandemic in Italy. More than 445,000 people fell into poverty in 2020 due to the pandemic, adding to the more than 4.5 million poor in 2019. More than 50% of unemployed and temporary employees fell into poverty due to the containment measures set up after the first pandemic wave. The most hit categories, the categories that were more severely hit were elderly, that were left alone with few or no assistance, women without a stable job, young gig workers, and the so-called NEET young, minors penalized by their familiar poverty, the school shutdown, and the relational collapse because of the need to stay at home. The category of the professional workers that saw a steep decline in their income, and finally the welfare services and social care workers that were penalized by the spreading of the pandemic and the need to stay at home and not work. So, yeah. During the emergency, what we have tried to do in Bergamo is to set up a experiment of collaborative welfare, opening to external actors in the public domain, and bringing together associations, family networks, and also informal groups of citizens, bringing them together in order to give a response to the emergency, with food being a case in point. So we, as a municipality, we try to gather all those actors and give a more structured response to the needs. The experience, in particular, of Bergamo, for Bergamo, was a network of spontaneous self-organized groups across the city, 30 self-organized groups across the city that were activated and were put together through the involvement and the commitment of the social services department of the municipality. So these experiences confirmed how beneficial it can be a bottom-up welfare, collective welfare that is managed by a centralized office, such as the social services office of the municipality, but that aims to bring together all the social actors across the city in order to achieve more proximity and more capillary action across the territory. So actually, this model allowed us to give an answer to a wider range of needs, not just the food, but to give an answer to a wider range of needs, and to be quicker also. So we all know how fast were those months, and it was really hard to understand which were the categories to support, and most of the time many people were supported by several measures, and other categories were not supported by no measures. So we, as a municipality, we try to gather, redirect, and reply to the various requests coming from the citizens, and be like we try to centralize the management of those requests. As for, the active policies implemented in Bergamo, we exploited, for example, the funding provided by the state in order to provide food vouchers to more than 3,500 beneficiaries. We also, as the experience I told you before, for Bergamo, we provided food packages to more than 800 families, and also supported the creation of meal delivery networks across the city, providing more than 300 meals per day to people, to the most vulnerable groups and elderly that couldn't go out. And also we implemented a mutual aid fund in order to collect funding and economic help from the private sector and citizens. So basically, all this experience prove that the importance of the alliances between institutional, non-profit organizations, and also the private sector, how the connections between all these different actors could help in providing an answer, a consistent answer to these arising needs. The greatest outcome of all these experiences, we believe that is the creation of the nutrition support working table that is a standing, still active working table coordinated by the social services department of the municipality, the social that brings together all the social actors working across the city in order to organize their actions and to provide a more consistent answer to the ever-changing needs in the city. Okay, this is it anyway, so thank you very much.
Davide, that was excellent, excellent. It really showed that no matter where you were in the world, that we all had the same type of plan, the same type of idea, and citizens, no matter what language you spoke in and where you were, they were coming together to support each other. And it just showed how different organisations were working. Excellent, well done. Can we now go back to the first film, please? But while they're finding that film, can I also say, have you seen these, the food pledge, the city's pledge to food justice? It should be on your seat. I actually think it looks beautiful. And what I'll do while they're lining up the film for me, I am going to read it out. As city mayors, we are committed to addressing food justice by acknowledging that all citizens, irrespective of status, are entitled to safe and nutritious food at all times, and we recognise the benefits of a collaborative partnership to address the global challenge of food insecurity exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, climate crisis, and disaster displacement. Now, it's a general statement, but I think it's a statement that everyone in this room will and is willing to sign up to. So as we go through, I just want you to remember what I'm trying to say. Are we ready? Have we done it? No? Yeah. We'll just move on. I was just told that it would be coming. No problems. So what we'll do is we will go straight over to Michael Fakhri. I may have got that wrong, but can we go over to Michael? Michael is going to do his speech digitally online. So have we got him in the room digitally? And Michael will be talking about what is food justice and the right to food and how it is enacted. Have we got Michael? This is not going very well, is it, guys? For heaven's sake.
Yes, you can see Michael.
Can we see Michael? Michael, can I hand directly over to you? Thank you, Michael.
We can't hear Michael.
Can we get any sound?
I can hear you.
Oh,
Okay.
Tanashi. Should we ask Dr. Tanashi to speak because we can hear him?
Right, Dr. Tanashi, are you able to speak? Because we cannot hear Michael at the moment. So if you speak first, then by that time, I'm hoping the sound problems will be sorted and we'll go straight over to Michael. Okay, so we'll have to
Okay.
jiggle the agenda. Thanks. Over
No,
to you.
Thank you very much. So can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so let me go for it, and let me thank you very much for inviting us. My name is Tinashe from the city of Johannesburg, here in Africa, and we are very happy to be part of this discussion, a very important discussion for that matter. Today, I'm going to speak to you just to share the experiences that the city of Johannesburg has had in this space of food security during the COVID-19. As you may be aware, in South Africa, we actually started having a hard lockdown in March last year, when we were locked at level number 5. So for South Africa, the lockdown number 5 means we could not go anywhere. You had to stay indoors and only go out when it's essential to do so. So it lasted for about 2 months between March and April. And what we actually experienced that time was that the city was not actually prepared to deal with the consequences of the pandemic when it comes to the food matters. We had been providing food security interventions to the vulnerable groups for many, many years. But when the pandemic came in, the demands for the interventions, they kind of like doubled from what we were used to, which we were not prepared. One of the key things that we observed was that our food resilience policy was not actually designed to withstand the pandemic itself or any other shock for that matter. So what I would want to say upfront is that the food resilience policies are non-negotiable for cities, and the following elements are very critical. We are one of the cities which has been very, very unlucky in the sense that we've had many political disruptions in the term of office. Our term of office runs for 5 years, and within the 5 years, it's actually ending in the next 2 weeks or so. We are actually at the height of political campaigns towards the new government, which will be formed in the next month or so. But in the last, in this term of office, we have had 4 mayors. We have had the resignation of the mayor, followed by the death of 2 mayors. And every time such kind of disruptions happen, the political administration is dissolved automatically by law in terms of the South African Constitution. So in our case, we've been caught off guard where political decisions were prerequisites, but without the political executive in place. However, the only constant which remained was the mandate to ensure that no one goes hungry. We've learned that our policies need to ensure that continuity is guaranteed, particularly during the pandemic. Therefore, we've also learned that depending upon the country's constitution, policies need to consider political disruptions as a result of the resignation or of the death of a mayor. So there are certain things that in South Africa cannot be done by law if the political administration is not in place. And if we are looking at a situation like the pandemic, people are hungry, hunger cannot wait longer, and the squabbles of who should do what because of the absence of the political administration becomes actually problematic. And we actually learned that we needed to review our policies to reflect what should happen in the event of such kind of a situation. Another issue that we've observed during the pandemic is that the food policies must actually transcend departments, and they must also transcend other policies. So it became clear that ensuring food security cannot be reduced to a single department intervention. In our case, in Johannesburg, the Social Development Department is actually the custodian of the food security policy and interventions. And what we are saying is that this does not work to reduce such a huge responsibility to only one department. It must be actually coordinated across the entire city and not only by one department. And it must also be coordinated across the entire spheres of government. Because in South Africa, we've got the local government where we sit as City of Johannesburg. We've got the provincial government and the national government. And all those three spheres of government need to be harnessed towards the common purpose, particularly where there is a pandemic. So in the event of a shock, food interventions need to transcend departments. And in addition, the food policies themselves, as we develop them, we are currently developing ours, or let me say reviewing our policy. It must also transcend other policies. So this is very important, I must highlight, that we have got other policies that are earmarked for the vulnerable groups, like the persons with disabilities, the gender policies, the youth, economic development, etc. But all these other policies, we must actually be able to ensure that the food policy itself, the resilience policy that we develop, transcends these other policies. Because we've seen that if there is no coherence among the various policies that are around the interventions that we want to do around food, it won't work. So what we've actually decided to do is that as we review the food resilience policy, we will do it simultaneously with other policies that are actually in the city that are earmarked for the vulnerable, so that they speak together. Another issue that we've observed is the need to improve stakeholder participation. During the hard lockdown, which I referred to in March 2021, we witnessed an increased number of private sector and NGOs coming on board to assist with food distribution to the vulnerable, including the homeless. However, the trend fast disappeared within 2 months into the hard lockdown. And why was it so? Many partners began to complain that our policies and regulations in Johannesburg and South Africa at large do not promote their involvement due to bureaucracy and a lack of clarity on processes. That is, the acts that we have, our Municipal Systems Act, our Municipal Finance Management Act, they've got vague clauses on how local government should actually engage. So it wasn't easy to engage the private sector and the NGOs without being asked whether one was providing preferential treatment to one over the other. Regulations were also not helping. During the COVID, some demands were very unnecessary. People are going hungry by day, but then the acts and the regulations are demanding that we go through the competitive process to procure food. And you can imagine in a bureaucracy, like ours in a government bureaucracy, how long does it take you to go to tender or to prove that you have not given a preferential treatment to one organization over the other? By the time you do that with all the processes, people who will have died, malnutrition will have kicked in. We also realize that there has to be a qualifying criterion for people to benefit from food resilience initiatives and to really deal with the issue of the food distribution. In other words, access to food or a balanced diet can be a consequence of ineffective distribution. That is why we've often found in our space that in certain areas, in certain areas, there are surpluses and there are deficits in other areas. So we need to ensure that there is data that is available and more engagement through intergovernmental relations with stakeholders so as to avoid double dipping. So we've had a very serious problem where one family or two families can actually receive food parcels from 3 or 4 different sources, while the neighbor receives nothing. Another important matter that we've noted in Johannesburg is that there is a need to monitor the food value chain itself. Cities must develop a clear value chain from the producer to the consumer. In the context of the COJ, our city, we've noted some opportunist elements that have disrupted the food prices and the flow of food to the vulnerable. We've also noted that monopolies can easily be created from the producer at the farm level to the market, therefore sabotaging other farmers due to favoritism. From the market to the consumer also, we have seen that there is a potential for role players in the food distribution to act out of good faith to benefit their own friends. So we've got big markets in the city of Johannesburg where certain agencies, they come together and collude. And that in itself is discouraged the small-scale local farmers that also would have seen the opportunities to participate in the food chains as a business. Because if we've got more commercialization of food production in a city, we're able to actually bring down the prices. But our people have been discouraged because of this monopolistic tendency. The closure of the border, entry points, and restrictions to human traffic from province to province has exposed the vulnerabilities in the urban food systems in Johannesburg. The disruptions of supply chains affected food availability in many areas in Johannesburg, where food was not able to reach the markets at all, and therefore putting upward pressure on the prices of food itself. So the lesson is that we need to do innovative approaches for import substitution through supporting small-scale farmers and promoting consumption and production of locally produced food that have proven to be essential in food security. So we need to encourage production of indigenous vegetables that contribute to improved diversity. So we've got our own types of vegetables that grow within our own space, and we need to capitalize on that. And that in itself will actually help us to make sure that we become a food nutritious city. Lastly, I would want to speak about the nutrition. We've noted that during the pandemic, it's not only about distributing food. We've got a large food bank project that we run. Over 100,000 families have actually benefited from food parcels, but mainly we give vegetables, a pack of vegetables, different types of vegetables, the carrot, you can name it, cucumber, etc. But food security actually transcends the availability of staple food and basic foods. It must take balanced diet into account. So the availability of the same type of food in large quantities does not necessarily translate to food security. That is our observation. Simply because malnutrition can also affect individuals in such a predicament. So social protection interventions such as school feeding programs and school gardens have actually assisted us quite a lot. We've done a lot in that space. And in addition, cities must actually promote farming techniques which use less space but intensive. So currently we are doing a feasibility study in the city of Johannesburg where we are benchmarking ourselves and trying to see what types of smart technologies can we use to double the production capacity in urban agriculture. So things like vertical farming, drip irrigation, etc. Those are some of the things that we are considering. Joburg does not have land. We are one of the cities that does not have land at all. So innovative urban agriculture becomes very key to make sure that we increase productivity within our space. So these are some of the things that we have actually observed in the city of Johannesburg. I will stop here for the sake of time because of my 10 minutes. And thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to share some of the things that we've been doing. Thank you, Program Director.
Dr. Tinashe, that was absolutely brilliant. Can I just say a couple of sentences and then I will move straight back. Have we got the voice now? Brilliant. Dr. Tinashe, what you talked about, that political voice being joined up, and if it's not, things become problematic, was absolutely brilliant. Also, the bit about data. Data is so key in everything that we do. But also, you talked about, it wasn't just about the produce, but it was about producing and protecting local produce. You covered so many areas today, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So thank you for that. Thank you very much. Let's give him another round of applause. Can we go back over to our keynote speaker, Michael Faraki? Have I said it right?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, brilliant. Over to you, Michael.
Great, thank you very much. And I think it's worked out well to go after Dr. Tinashe. I think he's shown Johannesburg really as a model for many other cities. And it's an honor to speak at the launch of the city's Pledge on Food Justice. I'm speaking as the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food, which means that the Human Rights Council has designated me to be the leading independent expert on hunger, malnutrition, and famine. So I'm acting basically as the eyes and the ears for the UN system in that regard. And I think the pledge, the city's pledge on food justice, is an excellent example of cities putting the right to food in action. And as this audience knows, local and city governments have been at the front line in the struggle against the food crisis triggered by the pandemic. So right now, it's more important than ever to have strong local and city governments. And I think if cities adopt this pledge, it can do several things. It will enable cities to act in several ways. First, this pledge empowers cities to pressure national governments when national governments are falling short in their duties and obligations. Second, the pledge provides a common framework for different cities to collaborate and work together, in effect deepening ties of solidarity. And third, it acts as a way to coordinate across different departments within a city and different levels of government. As we heard from Dr. Tinashe, food security is an issue that cuts across all levels of government and all departments of government. This pledge is a powerful political statement driven by a sense of duty. And I want to encourage cities to make this pledge a long-term commitment. And the way they can do that is by explicitly relying on the right to food. Cities can enact the right to food through local political processes, or they can simply reference the right to food and use the specific framework of the right to food when analyzing problems and implementing policies. The point is that the right to food gives cities even more power to do what they have to do to serve people. It gives cities more control over their destiny and survival. Even though the pandemic is forcing all of us to respond quickly to ever-changing conditions, it is also important to think in the long term. We have to think long term because our daily response to the food crisis is what is in fact transforming our food systems. Our actions today are setting the course for decades to come. What I'll do in my remaining time is explain what human rights means in general, and then explain what the right to food means and how it provides a particular framework. So human rights, first, a good way to think about human rights is to think about how they provide real power through international law and policy instruments. You don't start with a blank slate when you start from a right to food perspective. There are a large number of policy tools based on the right to food available through the UN Food and Agricultural Organization and the UN Committee on World Food Security. So I'll take a moment on how human rights can empower governments and people. You don't have to wait for national governments to enact or use the right to food. as a human right, any public body, any group of people can use the right to food. Second, human rights are about relationships. It helps us understand what's going on and what needs to be done. More specifically, human rights focus on the relationship between governments and people. That relationship is key to getting us through this crisis, to navigate the complexities of the food system. In the end, governments are only as strong as its people. So things like workers' rights, farmers' rights, women's rights, and children's rights are key to keeping people strong. The other relationship that is important is people's relationship to the environment. People are only as strong as the biosphere. So the purpose of human rights is to ensure that every sector of the economy and every aspect of society works to serve and empower those relationships, the government and the people and the environment. So to get to the specifics on the right to food, the right to food is not just the right to be free from hunger. It is a right for everyone to celebrate life through their meals with each other in communion. Food is a key way that people define their very understanding of community. Food is not just a marker of cultural identity, but a maker of cultural identity. A city's food culture is one of the most defining features of a city. So things like restaurants, street vendors, local shops, farmers markets, public procurement programs, schools, universities, and hospitals all structure a city's food culture. So this also means that things like permits, zoning, minimum wages, taxes, and training programs are not just matters of economics or economic growth. These are the tools that a city can use to enhance its food culture in a way that meets people's needs and enables them to flourish in their daily life. In other words, restaurants, local shops, cooperatives, and other food businesses provide the critical infrastructure for justice. The right to food means that everyone, regardless of their status, is entitled for their food to always be adequate, available, and accessible. I'll explain what those mean. So, adequate means that people must have good food. They have the right to determine what is good food. This means that people must decide for themselves what is culturally, nutritionally, socially, and ecologically appropriate food based on their particular conditions. The key value here is dignity. The second is that food must be available. People must have a reliable source of food. This can either be directly by feeding oneself, by working the land, or having access to natural resources, or it's about ensuring that food is available in shops and markets. The key value here is fairness. People's access to natural resources must be equitable, and markets should be fair markets. And finally, food must be accessible. Governments must ensure that food is always economically accessible to everyone. This means that institutions must ensure that people should always be able to get to a good meal. This might be through free school meals, fair markets, or a social system that ensures that people have the time and resources necessary to cook at home or feed their communities. Food must also be physically accessible. This means that governments must ensure that all food systems and institutions are universally inclusive. The key value again here is inclusivity. I like to think about access as a matter of accessing a kitchen, like if you broadly define a kitchen. So regardless of a person's physical ability, state of health, legal status, or housing condition, states must support everyone's ability to get to a kitchen in order to obtain or make a good meal. Now, the right to food is different than charity. In models of charity, often people lose some sense of their dignity, because charity often depends on the mercy and dictates of those with power and plenty. Charitable institutions play a role, but they've also been a vehicle by which those with power try to control people. And the right to food is different than food security. Of course, these terms are different when they mean different things. But food security often is used as a way to focus on access and availability, without the issue of, it's not an issue of entitlement when we talk about food security. And there's no issue of obligation. So the right to food addresses the issue of power imbalance. So food security might leave the power in the hands of civil servants and experts and politicians. All of us play a role. I'm in that group, I would say. But inevitably, the power has to be in the hands of the people. And so issues of transparency and process are key to the right to food. In sum, the right to food is about good relations between the government and the people based on accountability and dignity, good relationships between people in the land and waterways, and good food that makes people stronger and the land more resilient. Thank you very much.
Again, can I say a wonderful speech, wonderful. And what you've managed to do, Michael, is bring together what others have been saying and put the policy piece behind it to why people need, that they have the right to decent food. And the example I'm going to give is food should be adequate and accessible. And you said the value there, the key value is it gives dignity. What you've done is you've put it in one so people feel if they need food, if they cannot afford it and they have to receive it from other sources, that they have the dignity, that they don't feel as if they're bothering people or they're being a nuisance. And this is why political power and need to get their act together. And this is also why I absolutely agree with Dr. Tinashe. It has to circumvent every other department that you're working with. So again, excellent, excellent speech. Now, for the third and final time, I'm going to try again. Is Katerina's video ready? Guys, are we going to try? And then we're going to bring Justin in after. Then we'll do question and answers all together. So if you've got questions, please write them on a little note and we'll have some time to do that after. Is the video ready? Can we start it, please? I'm taking my glasses off because I can't believe it. Do we need to go over to Justin to try? I think what we'll do is we'll go, hang on. Do you want us to go on to the last speaker?
Palma Reis, sou nutricionista e atuo à frente do Banco de Alimentos da Prefeitura de São Paulo desde o início da pandemia por SARS-CoV-2. E venho hoje falar sobre os efeitos negativos da pandemia da Covid-19 sobre a segurança alimentar das famílias, sobretudo as em situação de vulnerabilidade social no Brasil e no estado de São Paulo, e trazer as estratégias e políticas públicas que já existiam, porém alcançaram um patamar diferenciado de importância durante a crise sanitária, econômica e social que enfrentamos. Os resultados de estudos populacionais em nível Brasil de 2018 mostravam que menos da metade dos domicílios brasileiros, 44,8%, tinham seus moradores em segurança alimentar. Dos demais 55,2% que se encontravam em insegurança alimentar, 9% conviviam com a fome, ou seja, estavam em situação de insegurança alimentar grave, sendo pior essa condição nos domicílios de área rural, chegando a 12%. A insegurança alimentar grave aumentou para 19% nos domicílios brasileiros, onde algum morador havia perdido o emprego ou houve algum endividamento, ambos em razão da pandemia. A insuficiência de renda, associada ao aumento do desemprego, a degradação das condições de moradia e de infraestrutura sanitária, entre outros motivos, intensificaram a disseminação da insegurança alimentar nos grupos populacionais mais vulneráveis. Os dados de um estudo de vigilância epidemiológica em segurança alimentar e nutricional, o VIGISAN, de 2021, mostram que tivemos um retrocesso de 15 anos em apenas 5. Retrocesso ainda mais acentuado nos últimos 2 anos. No período entre 2013 e 2018, a insegurança alimentar grave, ou seja, a ocorrência de fome, teve um aumento de 8% ao ano. Esse aumento é acelerado e passa a ser de 27,6% ao ano entre 2018 e 2020. As vulnerabilidades sociais muitas delas determinantes da capacidade de acesso aos alimentos, também cresceram nesse período de 2 anos. O desemprego, que é um fator relevante na gênese da insegurança alimentar, aumentou a uma taxa de 12% ao ano, segundo dados do IBGE. Outros fatores reveladores de vulnerabilidade também estão associados à insegurança alimentar, tais como gênero, raça ou cor da pele da pessoa responsável pelo domicílio, ou baixo nível de escolaridade. Essas condições, que por si só conferem maior vulnerabilidade social às famílias, aumentam as chances de maior insegurança alimentar e fome. Na região sul e sudeste, onde está localizada a cidade de São Paulo, 47% da população vive em insegurança alimentar, nos seus diferentes níveis. Dessas, 6% vive em insegurança alimentar grave. Deste modo, a Coordenadoria de Segurança Alimentar e Nutricional, a COSAN, setor que integra a Secretaria Executiva de Segurança Alimentar e Nutricional, Abastecimento e Agricultura, a CESANA, de acordo com o Decreto 60.533 de 2021, tem como responsabilidades coordenar e assessorar a implantação e o funcionamento do Sistema Municipal de Segurança Alimentar e Nutricional Sustentável, atuar em conjunto com os demais órgãos da Prefeitura na realização de ações emergenciais de segurança alimentar e nutricional para garantir o controle de qualidade nutricional e sanitária dos alimentos, apoiar e criar condições para o funcionamento da Câmara Intersetorial de Segurança Alimentar e Nutricional, a CAISAN, e do Conselho Municipal de Segurança Alimentar e Nutricional, o COMUSAN. Gerenciar e fiscalizar os Centros de Referência de Segurança Alimentar e Nutricional. A COSAN conta com 2 Centros de Referência em Segurança Alimentar e Nutricional, os CRESANs, que se constituem em equipamentos públicos de caráter comunitário, voltados à implementação da Política Municipal de Segurança Alimentar e Nutricional, consubstanciando-se em espaços de vivência da cidadania, bem como de convivência e participação social. São atribuições dos CRESANs: buscar a garantia do direito humano à alimentação adequada, favorecer a articulação de políticas públicas vinculadas à segurança alimentar e nutricional, facilitar o acesso regular aos alimentos de qualidade para a população em situação de insegurança alimentar, incentivar a alimentação saudável em quantidade suficiente e de forma sustentável, realizar ações de educação alimentar e nutricional por meio dos programas e projetos específicos da COSAN e promover a reinserção social por meio de programas e projetos ligados à gastronomia, promovendo ações de conscientização socioambiental, entre outros. É no CRESAN Vila Maria que se encontram as instalações do Programa Municipal Banco de Alimentos. O Banco de Alimentos, que promove a segurança alimentar e nutricional junto à parcela vulnerável da população, tem como principais objetivos captar, coletar, receber, selecionar, armazenar e acondicionar toda espécie de alimentos aptos ao consumo humano, com ou sem valor comercial, com a finalidade de distribuí-los junto à parcela da população que se encontra em situação de vulnerabilidade, por meio de 410 entidades assistenciais cadastradas junto ao programa. Em 2020, o Banco de Alimentos passou de 310 entidades para 410, quando abriu um chamamento público para ocupação de 100 vagas. Isso representou um aumento de 105.700 cidadãos atendidos pelo programa. As entidades cadastradas no Banco de Alimentos atendem públicos variados de forma abrangente e inclusiva, desde famílias, diretamente nas comunidades carentes, lares de idosos, abrigos, entre outros grupos variados. Além disso, os números das arrecadações e doações realizadas pelo Banco de Alimento evoluíram e atingiram uma marca histórica no ano de 2020. O total arrecadado foi de 2.454 toneladas de alimentos e o doado de 2.245 toneladas, além da doação de mais de 48 mil cestas básicas, que foram pela primeira vez na história do Banco de Alimentos distribuídas às entidades assistidas. Com as doações de 2020, estima-se o atendimento de 713 mil pessoas. Vistos os dados históricos atingidos em 2020, ressaltamos a importância dos doadores e principalmente das parcerias realizadas com a Secretaria Municipal da Educação, que reverteu em doações todos os alimentos adquiridos para a merenda escolar após a suspensão das aulas devido à pandemia de Covid-19, As doações realizadas pela Secretaria Municipal da Educação totalizaram em 2020 1.700 toneladas de alimentos. Em 2021, os números estão abaixo das marcas históricas atingidas em 2020, mas ainda acima dos recordes históricos do período pré-pandemia, atingindo já a marca de 1.130 toneladas e 334 mil pessoas atendidas. Além deste, COSAN coordena outro importante programa de promoção de segurança alimentar e nutricional junto à população vulnerável de forma geral, incluindo pessoas de todas as faixas etárias, que é o Programa Municipal de Combate ao Desperdício e à Perda de Alimentos, cujos objetivos são aumentar o aproveitamento dos gêneros alimentícios disponíveis para consumo humano em território municipal, mitigar o desperdício de alimentos, contribuindo para a redução da insegurança alimentar e nutricional, ampliar o uso de alimentos sem valor comercial por meio de doação destinada, criar mecanismos para evitar o desperdício e a perda de alimentos, promovendo iniciativas de melhorias na cadeia produtiva e no processo de doação de alimentos. O programa tem 3 eixos, sendo o primeiro, promoção de segurança alimentar e nutricional, com a distribuição de alimentos saudáveis, próprios ao consumo humano que antes seriam descartados para pessoas em situação de insegurança alimentar, por meio das 410 entidades assistenciais cadastradas junto ao Banco de Alimentos. O segundo, socioeconômico, que é a captação e a reinserção no mercado de trabalho de pessoas desempregadas em situação de vulnerabilidade social e econômica, por meio do Programa Operação de Trabalho. Os beneficiários participam diretamente de atividades ligadas à arrecadação de alimentos e são qualificados nos temas de boas práticas de manipulação de alimentos e aproveitamento integral de alimentos. E o terceiro, o ambiental. Milhares de quilos de alimentos são aproveitados antes de serem encaminhados para pátios de compostagem ou aterros. Após triagem, a fração dos alimentos coletados que não serve ao consumo é destinada para os pátios de compostagem da Prefeitura de São Paulo. Do início do programa, em outubro de 2017, até o momento, foram arrecadadas mais de 600 toneladas de alimentos, impactando mais de 1,6 milhões de pessoas em vulnerabilidade e mais de 390 beneficiários já passaram pelo pote combate ao desperdício. É extremamente necessária a recomposição do tecido social por meio do debate democrático, informações fundamentadas e políticas públicas orientadas pelo princípio humanitário de inclusão e equidade. Precisamos alertar a sociedade e os governantes para a natureza urgente e imprescindível de ações e políticas públicas efetivas que auxiliem os grupos populacionais mais vulneráveis e promovam a segurança alimentar e nutricional, ao lado de políticas estruturais direcionadas à redução das desigualdades e iniquidades sociais.
Right. Once again, can I say that Brazil has absolutely shown what they've had to do to get through COVID-19. And again, I think we're hearing the same messages over and over again. They've looked at different ways of ensuring that the population was fed at that difficult time, but also long-term looking at policy to ensure that if this does happen again, they've got something in place. Now, because of time, I will move swiftly on. Over to Dr. Justin Varney. He's the Public Health Director in Birmingham, and he will talk in more depth than I did about Birmingham and the UK's experience on a wider level. Justin, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, and if I can have my slides, that would be great. As Councillor Hamilton alluded to, we experienced the COVID pandemic in a very similar way to Bergamo and to Johannesburg and Sao Paulo, in that our citizens faced many restrictions on their life. But we also experienced the impact of having recently left the European Union and the supply chain challenges that happened with food. The impact on the supply chain of sickness in lorry drivers. And also we saw that people didn't donate food in the way that they had before. So our resilience in our charities and in our community sector to provide food for those that are most challenged was reduced, because people weren't giving food because they were seeing empty shelves, and that created a climate in which food security very quickly became a priority in terms of the COVID response for the city as well. Are we able to get my slides up?
Sorry, Justin.
There we go.
Yeah, I was going to say, could you keep going?
I will.
Yeah.
So in terms of the learning from that, I think what we saw was prior to the COVID, we had thought about food security, but I would not say it was top of the agenda. We are, by nature, a high-income country. The average salary in Birmingham is, on a weekly basis, about £600 a week. However, about a third of our children live in poverty, and about 8.5% of our population are unemployed. And we've seen that pressure on the system of poverty increasing through the pandemic. So that led us to a discussion around the right to food, and a discussion that I had with Councillor Hamilton as our lead politician around how as a city do we talk about the right to food when cities struggle to leverage some of the changes that are needed. So much of the challenge of food security in Birmingham was driven by national decisions by our government, about decisions around welfare, about benefit support, about trade agreements with the European Union, and also driven by the way that our national media chose to report on supply chain issues. I remember in the first wave of the pandemic, a conversation with Milan and other cities as part of the Pact, where we were sharing which product was missing for your shelves. In England, we are obsessed with toilet paper and baked beans. I understood that in Italy it was slightly different in terms of what people bought. And that was driven by the media more creating a panic, which led to pressures on the system. So out of that reflection has come an agreement that politicians in cities must raise their voices more clearly on the issues of food justice, that food justice and food security is a political issue. And although we worked together well on operational solutions, and we shared across the Pact partnership much of the learning from Northern Italy, who was hit hardest first in Europe, around setting up food distribution, about supporting food banks and civic leadership on the food supply issues, it is in the political space we now need to take this conversation on food justice. So, as I've said, we've talked about this in the context of both political issues and operational. And as Michael mentioned beforehand, it is not that this hasn't been a discussion that hasn't happened before. The International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights is clear. The right to food is a human right. And that is a political statement of intent. But many of the international statements are seen as jobs for national governments to lead rather than for cities. And that's what we're saying today. This is time for cities to take our space in this. We have led much of the operational delivery on food justice through the pandemic, and we must build on that learning moving forward. Michael stole my thunder, but it saves on time, and talked about the dimensions of what is needed to increase people's right to food, to give every citizen in every city the right and the ability to put food on the plate that they enjoy, that is safe, that is affordable for them and their family, and that celebrates their culture and their identity and gives them a healthy diet which isn't damaging the environment. And many of the areas where we act already and need to act are already in the Milan Food Pact system work. the work that we do on food systems fundamentally contributes to food justice, but we need to bring that contribution into a more visible statement of intent. And that's why today we as a city are launching the City Pledge on food justice to bring together city leaders' voice into this sphere and to contribute our voices to calling for action and taking leadership on the right to food for all of our citizens in all of our cities. The Food Pledge itself is a short statement of intent. We've launched it and the information is available on the City Council website. We have also translated the pledge initially into 15 languages. There are further languages that will be published in the next few days on the website to help you take this back into your cities and discuss it with your politicians. So finally, the ask from us is to join us, to work with us to bring more political voice of cities into this space. For as cities of the Milan Pact, that we work together in the political space to argue that food is a human right, and it is a right that all citizens deserve. Thank you very much.
Justin, excellent. Sorry, Dr. Varney, excellent. You're right, and I think the message from today is the right to food is a human right, and I am really proud of what we are trying to do in Birmingham in leading this. I have to thank the Food Foundation and others. Without them, we couldn't have got this far, but no one works in isolation as an island. So what we've been able to do is to start this conversation to get other cities to join us and to see what other cities are doing. But enough from me. Has anybody got any questions? We have got time because I thought it was easier to get all the videos and stuff out of the way. So I have changed it slightly. Has anybody got any burning questions that they'd like to ask, either the people online or our two esteemed speakers that are sitting in the room? Anna, can you start for me, please? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Anna Taylor from the Food Foundation. I have a question for Michael, if that's possible. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on if we can get the momentum behind this pledge and lots of cities sign up to it. You talked about the sort of signal that it sends to, well, the ability that it creates for cities to put pressure on national governments, where cities themselves might not have the policy levers that they need to put into, implement the right to food, but where national governments do. I'm interested in your view from an international perspective as to whether, if we have an international group or a group spanning number of countries, of cities that are supporting this pledge, what do you see as the sort of routes to influence the national context on these issues? Because that seems to me the key challenge, and do you sort of have a vision for how that could play out in the coming months?
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for your question. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So first I'll just identify what's not working well. There's been multiple opportunities for governments to work together multilaterally and address the food crisis, and every time they've failed to come together. So at different UN institutions and different committees, and I've been involved in many of these efforts, national governments are not working together. Right now, there is no multilateral response to the food crisis. And certain countries that are very export heavy on food, they keep blocking these multilateral attempts. So we're stuck at the international level. And where I see hope is at this level of city and local governments. And a pledge like this tells me that where national governments are falling short, cities can not only model about working together, but they can collaborate and put pressure on multiple governments at the same time. So a pledge like this is not just about coordinating action within city governments and amongst city governments, which is so key. I think it's so fundamental. But it also shows cities putting international pressure, which is absolutely necessary. We keep pushing, and this is going to be a long struggle. So a pledge like this, I think the more cities sign on to this, not only are they empowering themselves, but it allows cities to have a stronger voice across multiple governments at the same time.
Thank you for that, Michael. A brilliant answer. Are there any more questions in the room?
Councillor.
Oh, right. Go on then, Justin.
I wanted to ask a question of the other cities on the panel, and Michael, I'm sure, will have a view on this as well. How, if you're a city which has a strong link to agriculture, whether the challenge of the commercial interest that Michael was referring to there becomes a challenge in being stronger on affordability of food. Birmingham does many things. We make many things, but food is not really one of them. We're much stronger on cars and buttons, and jewellery is big in Birmingham as well. But I wonder whether for cities where agriculture is more of a lever, or it is tied to the city's identity more strongly in terms of tourism, that commercial risk may be an influencing factor that we need to think about in supporting cities to join this statement. So I just wonder whether any of the cities on the panel have thoughts on that.
Could we start with Dr. Tanashi? Have you got any thoughts on that, Dr. Tanashi?
Unfortunately, I couldn't hear properly. The voice was not that clear from Justine.
Okay.
I just couldn't hear exactly what the question was.
Right. Well, I'll ask Justin to repeat the question again. It was about agriculture and about exporting and the costs, but I'll ask Justin to repeat it again.
So the question for the cities is, if in your city food is a major commercial factor, so whether you grow food, whether food is a big part of tourism and trade, do you feel that it becomes a barrier to talking about the affordability of food? Because if we want food to be cheaper for everyone, that has a commercial impact if that is a big part of your economy. I'm not sure, am I explaining that?
No, that's pretty clear. But Dr. Tanashi, could you hear that? If you can't, it's okay.
I really can't hear the voice. Yeah, I can hear you, the chair, but Justine, I can't.
Right. Well, Justin was talking about agriculture. The fact that, and I may have got this wrong, but the fact that in some local areas, agriculture is big in those areas, so there is a cost implication. So because of the cost implication, is that a barrier for some of the work that you are trying to do, or could it be a potential barrier? Have I got that right, Justin? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's the question.
No, that's clear. In our own experience in the city of Johannesburg, depending upon the nature of the municipality. For Johannesburg, we're a metropolitan municipality. That means that we've got enough resources to actually deal with these matters. But it's not the case with other cities. We've got only about 6 or 7 metropolitan municipalities in South Africa. The rest of the other municipalities, their resource base is actually backed up by the national government. Unlike ourselves, we actually collect money for ourselves. We generate the income at the local space. So in the context of the cities like Johannesburg, or a city of Cape Town, city of Pretoria, Tshwane, the cost implication is not really a barrier. Yes, to some extent it is, but we've got a budgeting process that is in place where the food issues can actually get a share from that particular process. So I can say that in terms of the pledge, like this particular pledge, in our case, we will promote that let's start with the metropolitan municipalities like ourselves, and then we can then trickle it down to other local municipalities that probably might actually need the leverage from the national and the provincial. But I just wanted also to weigh in on the matter that has been raised by the previous speaker in terms of the local government and its relationship with the national government, how we can actually lobby and leverage our cause. In the city like ours, what we've done is that we've developed a framework for intergovernmental relations, which we call the IGR framework or strategy, that actually enables us in the city. We've actually positioned food security as a strategic matter that features on a monthly basis. We meet with the province and the national at an IGR forum, and there we put on the agenda issues that we think are actually important to change the lives of the people. And then for us, we've elevated the matters of food security and policy making in that process in this particular forum. So that even though our mandate is limited, but our voice, because everything happens in space, whatever the province or national happens, it happens in space. Therefore, it will be happening in Johannesburg, as an example. So we've got that platform where we actually lobby on behalf of the vulnerable and make sure that the voices are heard. So for an example, if we happen to sign this particular pledge, which I am quite hopeful that we'll do, immediately we'll actually present it to our partners in the provincial and the national sphere. So that is one of the mechanisms that we've actually put in place in the city of Johannesburg to ensure that.
Thank you, Dr. Tinashe. You've actually answered the question I was going to ask. How will you take it forward, the next steps? Now, could I ask, Carolina, do you want to say anything on that question, or are you all right? Would you like to say a few words? Karina.
Em São Paulo, nós temos algumas políticas públicas relacionadas à agricultura.
Thank you. I really can't understand. I haven't got... Maria, what did she just say? Yeah. She just wanted to...
Marie's saying, could you ask Karina to repeat what she said?
Oh, Karina, could you repeat what you've just said, please? So it can be translated.
Sim. Em São Paulo, nós possuímos algumas políticas públicas relacionadas à agricultura.
En São Paulo hicimos algunas políticas. Oh, sorry. In São Paulo, we did some public health focus on agriculture.
Okay. All right.
Nós temos uma frente chamada PA, que funciona com aquisição dos alimentos para doação.
It's Portuguese. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I am Spanish, but I think she wants to say that at a local production for a local distribution.
Yeah. Yeah.
E temos a Frente Nacional que é a aquisição de alimentos para utilização da merenda escolar.
It's in a national level and focusing educational and primary and secondary education.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, and thank you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you. And I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. Okay, thank you. David, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, actually, I believe that they can be contrasting, that they could have contrasting implications, of course, but still are really important issues. And access to food, commercial issues and access to food cannot be separated. So you really need to find a balance and accept that you need to get a solution to allow access to food also to vulnerable groups, still protecting the local productions and commercial networks in the city. So
no, that's fine. Thank you.
I think that is it.
That is it. That is it. And Michael, I'm coming to you last. Have you got anything around the agricultural question that was just asked, or any final words or thoughts?
I'll just say that every city will have different relationships with the rural communities. So some cities, as we heard, like Johannesburg, are producing wealth and money, but many cities have a relationship with local farmers. And I think there's many ways of thinking about connecting the city to rural communities. And we've heard, for example, in Brazil, in São Paulo, for example, procurement programs, the schools. These are examples that other cities can look at of how to also, so it's not just about feeding people, but it's also about empowering the food producers and empowering food workers as well. And it's those relationships, it's that thinking in those systemic terms, I think, that will lead. And a pledge like this, that's the other thing, is in some places, those relationships cross borders. So that's why cities have to work together. So not only do they have to pressure their own governments, but they have to think across different borders. So a pledge like this, I think, can really enable cities. Thank you.
Fantastic, Michael. And my final thoughts before I hand over to finish for today. Let me go back to the panel and just say, I did ask Michael for his final thoughts, but Justin, have you got any final thoughts?
Only to say, sign the pledge, please. And join us. I think all of the panellists have demonstrated this is a space we as cities need to be in. And we have been silent in this space for too long. So join us and step up into the conversation.
Brilliant. David, any final thoughts?
In my technical position, I'll try to work with my municipality towards the pledge and what the pledge says. So I actually believe that we really need to reimagine how the food system functions and how cities function. So actually this pledge is going in the right direction, and I think that is in charge of us, the officers, city officers, that need to lobby within their own city council in order to reorient, let's say, politics, policies in cities.
Thank you for that. Can we now go straight over, I'll probably get it wrong again, but Karina? Have I got it right? Great stuff. Karina, any final thoughts? Did she hear me? Karina, any final thoughts before we finish? Oh, I don't think she can hear me. Okay, and can we go over to Michael? Any more final thoughts before I leave you?
No, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, and the last person is Dr. Musharami. Tinashe, that could not remember his name. Forgive me. Dr. Tinashe, could I remember your name? No. So, Dr. Tinashe, final thoughts.
Thank you very much. I think for me, everything that has been spoken about today and all these innovative ideas, we must encourage cities to really develop policies towards food resilience. Because we can have all these good ideas, but if we do not package them into policy, we are not going anywhere. I'll give you an example. Politicians, they come and go, but us administrators, we are here to stay. So if, in the sense where we have had many changes of government, if we had a resilient policy that is empirically based, it should not, I know that policy is a political process, but we should actually influence it technically, empirically, with evidence, so that it can withstand. When politicians come and go, work continues. So my last thought is, let's encourage cities to develop or review policies. Pandemic has given us an opportunity to relook at the resilience of our policies. And State of Johannesburg, we are actually at that stage. Thank you.
Right, thank you. My final thoughts. This has been an excellent session. I know we've had our difficulties, but it has been an excellent session because what we've heard is the passion from the different cities. Let us try to bottle this to move forward. There is a willingness out there to work together. I have to agree with Dr. Tinashe. Politicians do come and go. The problem is one set of politicians may have a view which is what the administrators want, and another set of politicians could come along and wipe it away. So let us not make it political. This has got to be something that is above politics, that people's rights are held, people are held to account for people's rights, because my last word is, and I'm going to use Justin's words if I can find them, people are entitled to have food. Food is a human right. And as a city, as countries, as the world, we have got to start appreciating that. And I think it was Justin that said, local government, we have an operational role, but we really do not have much power in that policy role to change things. But I think local government, the time has come, we need to start trying to influence national government to change the way they think. And probably with devolution, as we've got going on in the UK, start challenging government around moving some of those policies into the local space. This is the beginning of a really exciting process, and I know that the cities, when we go back, when we come back together again, I know a great deal of work will be done on this. So on that note, enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you for bearing with us with the videos. I'd like to thank all the speakers that have come online digitally, and plus our two speakers here, for all they've done this afternoon, but more so for you who have sat through this hour and 3/4 and have been very patient with us. So on that note, thank you and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.